Darkness fell like a stone curtain across the world. The sun, a pale and distant disk, bled across the sky before vanishing behind the dry mountains. There were no birds, no songs, only the sound of wind whispering, slicing. Hungry, the tribe sat motionless, huddled around a meager fire that spat weak flames, fed by brittle roots and ancient bones. They were 20, maybe fewer, bodies no longer defined by strength but by the stubborn refusal to die. Their clothing, once thick with furs, had thinned, no longer carrying the scent of the hunt, only the stench of hunger. Hunger. It was the new god of the earth. It hovered over the land like a silent deity, stripping life from trees, from rivers, from flesh. No game had been seen in moons. The soil had turned to ash. The air tasted of dust. The first human, known by no name, only by his presence, sat at the edge of the firelight, his eyes wide hollow, burning with something older than fear scanned the horizon beyond the fire's reach. The others muttered in broken breaths, sharing fragments of memories, of greener days, of fat beasts, of berries that once stained the fingers red. But those were myths now, shadows of a world that had ceased to exist. Each night stretched longer than the last. Each dawn arrived colder. The trees no longer spoke in the wind. The silence of the forest was absolute. Even the wolves had vanished. The first human's stomach gnawed at itself. He remembered the last time he felt full. It was when his father, long buried beneath frozen soil, had brought down a bull mammoth. That memory returned now, not as comfort, but as torment. The tribe's leader, a man with a broken nose and sunken eyes, spoke in guttural tones. "If food does not return," he said, "the fire will eat us next." Laughter followed, dry, cruel, defeated. That night, as the fire sputtered and the stars blinked behind a haze of dust, the first human rose, quietly, unnoticed, not to escape, not to hunt, but to see. To see if the world still breathed beyond the ridge. He walked into the cold. Each step forward was a question. Is there something left? Anything? Behind him, the fire cracked, a single echo of warmth in a dying age. Before him, the trees stood like bones. The sky hung heavy, pregnant with silence. He inhaled. The scent was nothing. Emptiness had a smell, yet something called to him, a rustle, a glint, a breath. No, just wind. But even the wind felt ... different. He pushed deeper into the dark, driven, not by bravery, but by starvation, of force stronger than fear, older than language. Somewhere in the vast silence, a new path was waiting. A path of bones. A path of instinct. A path that would change what it meant to be human. The cold did not cut him anymore, it consumed him. But the first human kept walking, not knowing what he was seeking, only that staying meant dying slowly. Yet when he returned at dawn, frost clinging to his lashes, hands trembling, he carried nothing. No root, no meat, no hope. The tribe was waiting. They circled him like wolves around a wounded deer, eyes narrow, jaws tight. In famine, suspicion replaced brotherhood. He had left in the night alone, without word, without permission. In a world this broken silence was crime. Initiative was betrayal. "You went out to feed yourself," one snarled, a woman with hollow cheeks and fingers like claws. "You brought nothing back," spat another, the leader with the broken nose. Nothing for the fire, nothing for the blood. They did not strike him, they did not need to. The rejection was colder than the wind. He had broken an ancient loner one leaves alone, because alone was dangerous, alone was selfish, alone was a whisper of something not quite human. The children were forbidden to speak to him. The elders turned their backs. His place near the fire was gone. He now sat on the outer ring where shadows stretched and warmth vanished. He tried to explain that there was movement in the forest, that the air carried a scent, faint but real, that the earth had not given up entirely, but they did not listen. Words meant little when mouths were dry and bellies were empty. Faith was for those who could afford it. He was now something less than a hunter, less than kin. He was alone among many days past. Hunger thickened like smoke. A boy died, first bones too light, eyes too wide. They burned his body with the last of the dry wood. The flames hissed, reluctant. The first human watched silently, feeling his exile deepen. No one met his gaze. He was the ghost among them, but he still had his eyes, and he still had memory. He remembered the cliffs beyond, the dead forest, the strange moss that clung to stone even in dry moons. He remembered his mother's stories of bitter roots that numbed hunger, of insects with shells like bark that could be eaten in silence. The others had forgotten, or refused to remember, but he hadn't. One night he rose again. No one stopped him this time. No one cared. In exile he was free. He walked deeper into the unknown, past the trees, past the scentless flowers, past the bones of old camps. He searched, not for meat, not for glory. He searched for something forgotten, something beneath the hunger, a truth, and if he returned, it would not be as a man, it would be as something new. The wind howled like an ancient beast, low and constant, as if the earth itself were grieving. The first human moved through the barren woods with a hunter's silence, though he no longer hunted animals. There were none, not even tracks. The ground was hard as bone, the trees bare like the ribs of a great dead giant. His stomach folded into itself, a knot of pain that had long ceased to cry out. It was now a quiet pressure, a constant reminder that he lived only by the thread. Days passed without food. Night stretched endless beneath a sky, so starless it felt like the gods had abandoned the heavens too. He chewed bark, bitter splinters bloodied his gums. He cracked frozen lichen from stones. It crumbled like ash in his hands. He dug with numb fingers into old burrows, hoping for forgotten roots or hibernating life. Nothing, only cold earth and silence. But he did not stop, because stopping meant dying, and death he believed now was for those who obeyed hunger, not those who listened to something deeper. One dawn, weak and on the edge of collapse, he came upon a strange sight, a fallen tree, cracked open at its heart, revealing a network of tunnels. Inside, movement, insects, thousands of them white, crawling, clinging to each other like beads of life. They looked like nothing, like filth, like the edge of rot, but he watched, and he remembered. His mother once whispered of a bitter time, when the great beasts disappeared and men fed on the smallest of the crawling things, when survival had no dignity, only instinct. He reached in, they wriggled on his hand, warm and alive. He brought them to his mouth, and swallowed. The first was horror, taste like mud, movement in the throat, rebellion in the gut. The second was less so. By the third, his body accepted the truth. This was life, not glory, not fire, not the hunt, but survival, raw, primal, unclean. He spent the day harvesting the crawling feast, smashing bark, scraping the underside of stones. He filled a pouch with larvae, beetles, and worm-like shapes that squirmed in their captivity. When night fell, he built a small fire, his first in days, and roasted a handful. The smell was strange, not meat, not plant, something new, something forgotten. He ate in silence. His strength returned slowly, not in power, but in clarity. He saw the world differently now, not dead, just hidden. The diet of survival was not what men craved, but what they had forgotten to accept, and this discovery was sacred. The next day he returned toward the tribe, not to beg, not to belong, but to offer, not food but truth. Would they see, would they listen, or had they already chosen hunger over change? He would find out. But as he neared the edge of the dead woods, smoke rose in the sky, too much smoke, too dark the camp. Something had happened, something waited. The smoke rose like a black serpent against the pale morning sky. The first human ran faster than his body wanted to allow. His legs burned. His breath came in sharp bursts. But the smoke grew thicker, darker, crueler. As he reached the ridge above the camp, he stopped. What once was a ring of firelight and human breath had become a scar upon the earth. The camp was gone. The ashes still glowed, charred furs, scattered, bones, a single, scorched spear. No screams, no bodies, whole, only silent sand, the stink of burnt flesh. His people, his tribe, gone, taken by flame or beast, perhaps both. He fell to his knees, not from sorrow but from something deep, wrapped in disbelief. Grief had not yet found him. It waited in the shadows, patient and cruel. Then he noticed the tracks. Clawed wide. Too wide for wolves, too many for a single beast. The memory returned. The old stories, of shadow beasts that roamed in famine, hunters of men, drawn to the scent, of desperation, creatures that walked between hunger and nightmare. Had the tribe been too loud in their dying, too weak in their fear? He stood. He could not mourn now, not yet. There was still breath in his lungs, still blood in his veins, still something growing inside him, something ancient, something new. He touched the pouch at his side. The insects inside still squirmed. Food, life, a secret the others never knew. He would not waste it that night. He did not cry. He did not sleep. He sat by the ruined camp and watched the stars return above the smoke, and he began to think. If the beasts hunted sound and fire, perhaps silence was survival. If the soil refused to give meat, perhaps it would yield something else. He explored the ruins, step by step, and there, half buried in a collapsed shelter, he found it, a clay bowl. Inside, forgotten during panic. A mass of strange mold growing over dried blood. He stared at it. Most would recoil, but the first human leaned closer. The mold was alive, not rot, but transformation, a dance of nature. He touched it, sniffed it, rubbed a finger across his tongue. Bitter, sharp, but not deadly. He watched how it broke the blood into softness, into something the insects fed on. Then it came to him not as a thought, but as a revelation. Fermentation. Decay, not as death, but as change. He collected the mold, mixed it with the insects, left it beneath a warm stone, sealed in leather. He waited, and when he returned days later, the contents had shifted. The smell was strange but rich, the texture softer, nutrients now released, easier to consume. A new way to stretch life from death. He had discovered a cycle older than language, not fire, not tools, not violence. But transformation. The diet of survival was no longer just insects. It was decay, it was mold, it was fermentation. It was a way to make the invisible legible, a secret path through extinction. He named it nothing, but it would one day be called culture, preservation, strategy. It would feed empires, but now it fed only one. Him, and as he consumed the living food, as his strength returned, so did something else. Resolve. The beasts that burned his people still roamed, but he was not the same man they had ignored. He was becoming something else, something they would not understand, something they could not kill. The night fell heavy, like a shroud soaked in blood. The first human stood at the edge of the black forest, staring into the stillness. The sky above him pulsed with silent stars. No fire burned, no sound betrayed his position. He had become a shadow, but they were near. He could smell them. The beasts, not wolves, not bears, something else, taller than men, eyes like molten coal, fangs yellowed with age and old kills. They had followed the famine across the land, drawn to the collapse of tribes, creatures birthed by death, thriving in the end of things. The first human had seen their mark in the ashes. Now he would see them with his own eyes. He was no warrior, not as his ancestors once were, but he had something else: understanding, patience, hunger sharpened into focus, and a new kind of weapon. From bark, he had crafted slivers soaked in fermented insect fat and blood mold. The stench was unbearable, even to him, but it was power, because the creatures smelled everything, and now he reeked of death. He had become invisible to them. He moved like wind. Among the trees he waited. 3 of them came, towering, sniffing. Their skin was stretched tight, pale and cracked like dried leather, joints twisted backward, fingers like branches tipped with claws. One growled low, another snapped at the dark. The third walked straight past him 2 steps away. He did not flinch. Instead, he watched, he studied how they moved, how they communicated. When one veered toward a noise, the others followed but delayed. They were coordinated, but not perfect. And now, he knew, they were not gods. They were predators, and all predators could bleed. He waited until they passed. Then followed, silent, patient, a ghost of muscle and instinct. The beasts returned to a nest, an old cave once used by his tribe in warmer times. Inside, bones, feathers, cloth, all torn, but among the chaos, a sound, a cry, faint, human. Survivors. The beasts had not killed them all. Some were still alive, and now the first human's hunger transformed, no longer for food, but for vengeance. He crept to the cave mouth, laid his traps: mold-soaked bark, sharpened stone, fermented bait. He smeared his body with rot, masked his breath with ash. Then he waited. The entire night. When dawn bled across the sky, one beast stepped outside, sniffing, searching. It found the bait. It consumed, and it convulsed. The mold burned from the inside, twisted its senses, turned its vision into madness. The first human struck, not with brute force but precision, spear to the throat, stone to the eye. The creature thrashed, roared, then Falut's blood, black and steaming. The others heard. They charged into the light, but he had already moved. He lured them into the second trap. It's masked with leaves, lined with sharpened bone. The second fell, screamed. The third tore through the trees, wild with rage. The first human did not run. He faced it, bare hands, bare soul. It lunged. He rolled, grabbed a fallen limb slick with fermented slime, and drove it into the creature's open mouth. The beast choked, gagged, and fell silent. It was done, all 3. Dead, by strategy, by rot, by the mind of a man who had eaten the invisible. He entered the cave. The survivors, 2 children. One elder looked up with hollow eyes. He said nothing. He gave them food, the insects, the mold. They hesitated, then they ate, and they lived. He had conquered death, not with fire but with transformation, and now the age of the beast was over. Age of becoming had begun. The sky wept ash for days. The wind no longer howled outside, as if the earth, weary from the agony of hunger and fire, could finally rest. The first human stood atop the ridge where the forest met the scorched plains, watching the world shift beneath his feet. He was no longer part of a tribe. He was no longer alone. He was something else, a bridge between what was and what would come. Beside him, the two children and the elder walked slowly, eyes still wide with the memory of beasts and fire. Their steps were uncertain, but their bellies no longer groaned. They ate the food he had taught them to find, the food no one had thought to claim. Worms, bark, mold, fermented rot, survival disguised as filth, life born from decay. The world was still cruel, but now it was knowable. He taught them how to gather the crawling harvest, how to ferment, how to trap without sound, how to read the sky and smell the roots beneath the frost, not as a leader but as a living memory, a story carved in bone and blood. And they listened, they learned. In time, they passed the knowledge to others, lonely wanderers who stumbled from the edges of death, scattered survivors drawn to the scent of smoke, to the taste of food that defied extinction. A new tribe formed, one not of blood, but of survival, of adaptation. They did not worship fire, they worshipped change. They named him not by word, for language was still forming, but by symbol, a figure with arms raised, covered in insects, crowned with ash. The first human, the one who did not die. His legend grew not for killing beasts, but for becoming more than hunger. He taught them that strength was not in muscle, but in the mind that saw what others ignored, that food was not what you wanted but what you understood, that survival was not luck, but choice. He lived many seasons, long enough to see the trees grow again, long enough to see the skies clear, and when he died, it was not in agony or starvation but in sleep. Beneath a mound of warm earth, his body wrapped in roots and bark, they buried him with a bowl of fermented insects beside him, a gift, a remembrance, a key. And from that moment on, every child of that tribe was taught the same story. When the world ended, he found food in the forgotten. When the beasts came, he became one who could not be hunted. When all was lost, he remembered what others denied. He was the first, and because of him, they would never be the last.